Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, licensed professional counselor, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves and life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope we can work on this journey of personal growth and development together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. I am so excited to share this episode with you because I am joined once again by Ray, who this time is sharing her experience in choosing to be child-free. We discuss her choice, the process, which, full disclaimer, can get a little graphic. She talks about the surgery and she talks about the recovery process, so feel free to skip ahead if you get a little squeamish, and what it's like for her after the fact since that surgery. While we name this during the episode, I also want to name here, right off the bat, that your life is yours and yours alone. No one can tell you how to be, what to do, or what to want. This episode is us sharing our choices around child rearing or lack thereof, but we are not trying to convince you or change your mind. This is a perspective that has some stigma associated with it, and this episode is geared towards letting it exist and trying to build awareness around what it means to be child-free. So let's dive deeper, see if we can get a little uncomfortable, and create some insight today. Hi, Ray. Welcome.
I'm back again.
You're
it's
back. For all of you that are listening, if you haven't listened to Ray's previous episode on Insights with Us, you need to listen to it. Her voice, her insight, her perspective on the world is just so incredible. So quick plug there of you. This is your second time back. And I have been since that episode, like, oh, I need to get her back on the podcast. We have to keep talking. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to be back too. I love talking to you.
Yes. And today we are going to talk about the child-free lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of want to just start with a blanket statement or question of, how did you know this is what you wanted?
Actually, it was very funny. So this morning I was talking to my partner about coming on and talking on the pod, about how I made like a very quick decision. And now that I'm looking back at it, I'm a very indecisive person by nature, but there are certain things in my life that have been big decisions that I feel very strongly about, and I move with them because it turns out to be the right decision every time.
Okay.
Like moving to Chicago was very quick of a decision. It was more like I got here and I was like, holy shit, I need to be here. This is my home. Or like picking what college I was going to go to, or realizing that my partner is like the one, like there's certain things that even though they happened very fast, it's like I'm so sure of them that I know it's the correct decision, because like I have a hard time picking between like, do I want sushi or do I want pizza? So if it's a big decision and I feel very confident about it, then I think that I just go with that. So it was something I didn't really even think about a lot. It was kind of like by default, I thought, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids, and that's what it's going to be, because I come from a very loving household. My parents actually just celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary and are really good role models and best friends. And so I grew up in a very good, wholesome house. So I kind of thought, that's what I'm going to do too. And then I was with a couple of people that when I was younger, that it was just like, I'm not going to think about this right now because this is a young relationship and I'm young and it's fine. So we'll come to that bridge when it's time. And then after my last big breakup before the pandemic, I was like, well, this is not the person I'm going to end up being with. So we're just not even going to think about that. And then I was single during the pandemic, and it was just like being single during the pandemic was such a different world than I had ever known before. And like we kind of touched on that briefly last time of like building up the relationship with yourself during that time. Um, and it was just like one morning that I woke up at like 10:30. I slept in so late and I was just sipping my coffee, sitting on my couch, watching YouTube videos. I had nowhere to be. It was like, maybe I'm going to go on a walk. Maybe I'm going to go to shop. Maybe I'm going to go to the park. I don't know. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I just could keep doing this forever? And I don't know why, but for some reason in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I can keep doing this forever. Like it was almost as if the option popped into my head all of a sudden. And then I was like, but no, I can't, because then I won't be able to have this moment. And then I was like, well, actually, I think I'm okay with not having this moment, you know, and going down the list and figuring out all these things that I thought I wanted for myself, that when I looked at it and gave myself permission to not have them anymore, it was like, oh, I actually don't care. And then the pros of not having kids just kept growing and growing and growing. And I was like, oh my God, I I don't have to have this end, this like this type of self-care. Um, yeah, it was just like a light bulb moment during the pandemic, just being like, hey, I can just keep doing this forever.
I don't know if I realized how recent that realization was for you.
Yeah, I think it's never, I've never been like, oh, I want to be a mom. It was always like, I want to have a family of some sort, but that was more like, I just want to be surrounded by love. I realized it wasn't entirely that I feel the need to mother, because like the long and the short of it is like, I don't want a kid. I don't want to make jam. I don't want to change diapers. I don't want to go to parent teacher conferences or like carpool or make lunches. And like,
They're always sticky.
yeah, just like that's the simplicity of it, was that I realized after I gave myself permission to, that I really, really don't want to be a mother.
Yeah. So you
And
reworked your definition of what a family could look like and
mm-hmm.
realized that the children was not a part of your definition.
Yeah. And it was like the biggest thing too is that like I don't hate children. I respect children.
Yeah.
And I think that they should have parents who want them. You know, I'm so incredibly fortunate to have grown up with a mom that wanted me. Like my mom is one of those people who's meant to be a mom and she's incredible at it. And she told me all the time of how much she wanted a baby before I came along and how much she loved parenthood. And like, while other mothers would complain about their kids being home for summer break and be like, oh, I need a break, which wasn't uncommon to hear. And I don't blame them for thinking that either. My mom would always counter with like, oh, I love the girls being home with me. I want them here all the time. I don't want them to go back to school, like without an ounce of sarcasm. And so I knew that like I would never be able to tell my children the same thing, because like if I did, I'd be lying. I mean, I just think that like through all of this, the thing I keep repeating to myself is that by choosing not to have children, I'm unapologetically prioritizing my own happiness.
Yeah. Well, and not making the choice just because it's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you had such a great model for what it meant to actually make the choice
Mm-hmm.
versus just following that should or that expectation. I feel like, the beginning of your story of I just assumed I'd always have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a family, so that's just what my brain told me I was going to have. But then the second you slowed down and consciously and intentionally looked at, well, what do I actually want my life to look like? What do I want to spend my time doing? What kind of love do I want to surround myself with? I appreciate the honesty and the ability to just look at the different options and give yourself permission to say, well, do I or don't I?
Mm-hmm.
Versus I have to.
Yeah. And it's like also just seeing examples of people who feel this strong urge to be a parent. Like my best friend is like, she's not a mother yet, but she basically is one already. Like she is so ready and has been talking about for years how much she can't wait for a baby. And every time she sees families or kids, she always is just like, I want that. I want that. And I realized that like, if that's what wanting a family so bad looks like, then I'm not meant for that, because that's not the same level of enthusiasm that I have for it. And I was always like assuming that it would just happen, that one day I'd wake up and I'd feel that maternal instinct. But like the way that Raina feels, my best friend, the way that she feels about babies is the way that I feel about kittens. You know, like,
Yeah.
not the same. You know?
Uh, one of my favorite analogies I saw it on Instagram not too long ago, but it was like, okay, for people that love animals, cats, dogs, whoever, I'm a dog person, as you know, you're a cat person. We
Mhm.
we can bond over it. It's fine. But it's like if you saw like the ugliest, weirdest looking kitten with like googly eyes that go in different directions or like a weird paw, you would want to take that cat home. You're like, I will love you. I will take so much care of you.
Yeah.
People feel that way towards children.
Yeah.
And
It's
like
wild.
it just I can't comprehend that towards kids. Like I like kids. They're cool. I was a children's rock climbing instructor through grad school.
Yeah.
I'm really good with kids. I do not feel that way towards children. If I
Mhm.
see a kid, I'm like, yes, yes, let's find you. You're human, not, oh, I'm going to take you home, which is exactly what I say to every single dog I see on the street.
Yeah. It's also like I gave myself permission, or rather, I didn't give myself permission, but my other friend, Nicole, she is kind of a person who, when we were talking about this, she's actually the runner of a podcast called Modern Anarchy, plugging besties podcast on another podcast.
Yay.
But she and I talked recently, right after I had gotten my sterilization surgery, and we talked about the experience on that podcast, which is crazy to listen to now because I was only 2 weeks out at that point, and it was like such a
Mm.
whirlwind of emotion, and there were so many things that I hadn't realized yet or hadn't actualized and been able to put that out there. But I love listening back to that episode too because it's so fresh and you can just hear in my voice how changed I feel already, and it's just precious to have that moment. But she is one of those people where I was like, well, I love kids on the podcast, almost kind of trying to defend my decision and be like, I'm not like a monster, quote unquote. And then Nicole was like, well, because I don't like kids. And it was one of the first times that I'd ever heard anybody like proudly say that. And it was kind of like, you know what? Actually, maybe I don't like kids as much as I thought I did, or
Yeah.
maybe as much as I said I did.
Yeah.
And so it's like besties on opposite ends of the spectrum of wanting children are just, it was eye opening in so many ways and
Yeah.
allowed me to like figure out where I landed on that side of the spectrum too.
I love that. I don't mind kids. I
Yeah,
would
that's how
not
I feel
like
now.
to have my own.
It depends on the child.
100% depends on the child.
Yeah.
But that defense, I'm very curious about that because we as women, especially if we're child free, we're always told, well, your biological clock is going to start ticking and that flip will switch. And oh, you're so going to want it. Or
Mm-hmm.
you're selfish for choosing to be child free. And I'm curious how your brain kind of worked through that societal dialogue and pressure, or if you just completely ignored it and just made your choice.
Well, I mean, it was a lot of insecurity at first, but I was really lucky that my parents were very supportive after the fact. I didn't tell them about it beforehand because I wanted it to be 100%, excuse me, my decision. But they were very, very supportive. And almost everybody in my life has been, like, or at least nobody's been brave enough to say it to my face. Um, but I mean, I've seen a lot of the arguments against it, and I know how a lot of people feel about it. And like my counter to the you're selfish aspect is I always agree with them, and I go like, you're right, I'm a selfish person, and the question here is, why would you want a child to have a selfish parent? So I
Mm.
agree with them because they're unable to see in this case that being selfish, which has negative connotations but is truly just prioritizing one's own well-being, not hurting others in favor of themselves as it's implied, but it's actually being selfless. Like I'm protecting a future child from finding out that their mother never truly wanted or planned for them, which is heartbreaking. And I wouldn't want to do that to anyone, regardless of whether I grew to love them or not. And another, like a common thing that I get is that you'll change your mind when you're older, or you'll see later. And that one really gets me because, like, yes, I'm wildly different now than I was 5 years ago. But one thing that hasn't changed as like a thoroughfare of my entire life is that a fear of being trapped in a life that I don't want. And it's one of my greatest fears that like I would meet someone and fall in love and then they'd want to have a kid so very badly. And then I would have one because I love them and I want us to have a life together. And then I would have one and it would trap me in a life that I would grow miserable in. And I fear that I would resent that child deep down for taking the life that I really wanted away from me and forcing me to be present and raising up another human instead of being able to devote that time to myself. um, there are just like so many women who have spoken about how they love their kids more than anything, but if they had the chance to go back and not have them, that they would do it.
Yeah.
And I just think that I would be one of those people. I would be so unhappy and I would love my child too much to be able to truly do anything about it. And like, society doesn't treat moms very nicely, which is a whole other topic to approach,
Mhm.
but especially moms who leave their families in favor of working on themselves. And in my corner of this like hypothetical life that I created, I would be ripped apart for trying to get better, for trying to make myself happy.
To try to
And
be a whole person and not just a mother.
yeah, like the pressure and the guilt and the shame of that would just destroy me. And I saw it all play out in front of me. So I blew up the bridge,
Mhm.
like when I
Yeah.
was single and I had nobody to account for into my future, like I took control of my life and I safeguarded the path that I knew I wanted at that time. And like I took out that option for a life that I wouldn't feel good about. And in my mind, I think it was the ultimate act of kindness for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you hypothetically in this world found a partner who really wanted kids and you did it for them and didn't really want kids, but you raised this kid anyway, this kid didn't choose to be in your life. This
Yeah.
kid didn't have a say necessarily in being a part of that. So again, it's selfless
Mm-hmm.
to choose not to have kids. It's like, I don't want to bring up a child in this environment where there
Yeah.
could be resentment, where there could be anger, where I might not be mentally okay because I have to give everything for this child. It is the selfless choice to
Mm-hmm.
say no. And also it benefits you in a
Yeah.
child-free lifestyle at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a bad thing in your mind that I'm like prioritizing myself, then so be it. But I'm not gonna stop. you know?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like anyone who is a mother should also be able to prioritize herself and have an identity away from that child too. I think that it shouldn't be an either or. And we need to have whole identities as individuals before even thinking about other people.
So it's
So,
like that's the hardest job in the world, and it's so important. And it's like you should want to do it. You should want that.
yeah.
And if you don't want it, you shouldn't be a parent. I mean, if I don't think that's a controversial opinion, but it's like
Mhm.
it's just crazy to it's such a hard job. And the fact that so many times people being child free is grouped along with people hating children or like not valuing parenthood is just like the biggest farce.
Yeah. Well, and once you have a kid, 3 years down the line, you can't be like, oh, I changed my mind. Goodbye, child. Like once
Yeah.
you've committed, you're in, which
Mm-hmm.
means the neutral should be opting out. It should
Mm-hmm.
always be opt out unless you choose to opt in. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's flipped for society of like, you need to opt into this and you have to fight to opt out.
Yeah. And I also just like I don't know. I think that I don't ever recommend it to anyone because I think it's an entirely personal decision. So I'm always like, if you're hesitating at all and you think like there's any kind of chance that I might want to have a kid in the future, don't do it. Don't even entertain it. But like if you feel as strongly as I did, then do
Yeah.
it. Go for it.
Well, and how you define family as well matters there because you can adopt. You don't have to have a biological child to have a child.
Yeah. And like right now where I'm at, I mean, I'm turning 30 in this upcoming year. And right now I don't plan on ever having a family like larger than me and my partner and our animals, but like also who knows? In many years, if I'm sitting with Ethan, surrounded by our friends' kids and our families, and like I feel the pull to have that for ourselves, and we decide that we'd like to adopt, like we can do that and we'll be ready. And the most important thing is that that person that we take into our family will truly know that they were wanted.
Mhm.
That means more to me than anything because I felt so wanted by my parents as a kid. I just can't
Yeah.
imagine growing up without that. And I know that so many people did.
Yeah. So many people did. Say my parents definitely loved me. They wanted a girl and they went through three boys to find me. But my mom is also one of those people of, if I could do it over again, I'd only have one.
Hmm.
And I tell her over and over again, it's like, yeah, if you could do it over again, you have my consent to not have me. Like, if you
Yeah.
didn't want to, don't.
And also I realize that I'm speaking from a position of extreme privilege from even being able to do this for myself. One, in today's like current political climate. I had my surgery in 2022. Uh, right? Or no, 2021. Yes, it was a
Okay.
year before I met my current partner, as if I'm leaving. um, yeah, so I've had a while to sit with it, and a lot's happened politically since
Yeah.
my procedure. But I think that, yeah, it's just important to note that I'm coming from a position of extreme privilege to be able to have a supportive system to not only go through with it, but also to be able to medically go through it. And it was covered by my insurance.
Oh,
So
that's amazing.
yeah, so it's an incredibly privileged position. I understand that. And also knowing the history of forced sterilization. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important to know for people that might be in a similar position that it's an option.
Yeah. So tell me about that option. Tell me about the procedure, and maybe because I know you have that podcast episode where it was
Mhm.
very recent, but now looking back on it, what was it like? What do you remember? How do you see it?
I was like so nervous. Um, I've had 4 foot surgeries in the past. I have messed up feet. And so I have gone under a couple of times, but this is the first time that I ever went alone because at this point I was single and I was living alone and my best friend was going to come pick me up from the hospital and stuff. But I didn't tell my parents, like I said, that I was going in. I told them actually that I was having a cyst removed because I was really nervous about the reactions and but I needed them to know that I was going under anesthesia because I have anxiety and I was like, what if
Yeah.
I die? So I was super nervous and I went in and I'm really like squeamish with IVs. And so I had like a big blanket over my hands when I was waiting and I was like watching TLC, just trying not to think about the fact that I was going to go under in a few minutes. And um, it was super quick. And when I woke up, I basically just like called my friend. They made me walk around, make sure I was okay, and I went home. And the recovery process was like rough, really rough. I feel like people
Okay.
really underplay how much
How was it rough?
healing wise it was like. So I had a bilateral scalpectomy, I think is how you pronounce it. I have been researching it for years and I had it done to me and I still can't pronounce it. But they call it biselp when you're talking about it online. So I had that, and it means that they went in with a camera through my belly button and then one incision on each hip, basically, so they could go in and take out sections of my fallopian tubes. So it's not getting your tubes tied; they were fully removed.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to say it's like the Thelma and Louise bridge that all of the sperm just kind of like off into into the cliff of my body.
Gross,
Um,
but also great, great metaphor there.
it's true.
Yeah.
So that was what I had done. So you can't reverse that. And that's a-okay with me. But
Mhm.
it meant that so when they do that process, they pump you full of gas so they can inflate the area when they're working on it. And that is like the strangest thing because the way that that gas reacts, it presents itself as nerve pain in your shoulder of all things.
Oh.
It was really, really strange. So like I'd be sitting down and it would feel like I just drank like 2 liters of Coke and I was like needed to burp so bad and that pressure would build up behind my shoulder and it felt like somebody was just like stabbing me with a chopstick.
Uh,
But so that was pretty bad and it was nerve pain, so you can't really take pain meds for that very often. I mean, I was on some like strong stuff but not, I
yeah.
still felt it. It was
Sounds
hard.
so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and then like you're uncomfortable standing because the gravity pulls at your stitches and internally it feels like there's like a string behind your belly button.
Hmm.
um and you're really like really bloated, like hunched over for a few days. So people who say you can go to work a day after, you're lying because I was just uncomfortable in like every position.
Those are people
um
that don't understand women's bodies.
Truly. But I mean, some people said that their experience, like they were like, I could go back to, I was working from home the next day. And I did, but I was like very uncomfortable and like moving around a lot. But other than that, it was a rough recovery for the first couple of days, in which help is so necessary. Like I would have died without Raina, who carried all my groceries upstairs and took out my trash for
Mm.
me and just helped me in so many ways, and didn't make fun of me when I drank a little bit of Coca-Cola one day after my surgery, which was so stupid. Because I was like so bloated already. It was just like so uncomfortable. Um, I appreciate that kindness though.
Yeah, just you know what? You're gonna do what you need to do, even if you
Exactly.
regret it later, like your mind needed this.
I needed my sweet little treat.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like sleeping was uncomfortable. It was really rough. But I will say, given all of that, the experience was 100% worth it. I mean, once I started to physically feel better, I was like, oh my God, I'm safe forever now. It's amazing to not have to worry about accidentally getting pregnant and not have to worry about if I have a late period, like, oh my God, could this be it? It's just my body, or there's
I'm
a lot
safe
of,
forever now.
yeah, it's just so nice. And it also like leads to a whole new level of intimacy, which is amazing in terms
Mm.
of closeness and not having to have that like fear in the back of your mind. Um, yeah,
What was it like meeting your partner, having made this choice and like having to have that conversation with him and seeing if it's okay, seeing if this is something that will keep the two of you together?
yeah. Well, it was incredibly easy with Ethan because he's Ethan and he's the kindest person I've ever met. But it was always my first date thing. I would, if I was feeling like I was vibing with somebody by the end of the first date, I would say, hey, just so you know, it's very important to me in my life, I'm not having kids. And sometimes they would be like, oh, what made you say that? And then they would talk to me, and either I wouldn't hear from them again, which is fine. That might not have been the reason why that was happening. Or they would just kind of be like, oh yeah, I never really like thought about that much, or something like that. And I feel like the types of people I was dating weren't really like, I want to have 12 kids let types of people anyways. But
Mhm.
yeah, I always respected people's decision, and I would say that to them too. I would be like, I'm not having kids. If that's a deal breaker for you, there's no problem with that. Like, that's fine. I just want you to know that that's not happening with me. So I was very like upfront about it, and like, I'm not here to play anyways. I'm looking for a life partner. So if you
Yeah.
don't like this, I'm not for you.
You're just so secure in what you want and who you are, which we talk about that in the last time you came on this episode as well, or on this podcast as well. But just you're looking for what you're looking for.
Hmm.
And I feel like this choice just really emphasizes that of I want the life that I want and I'm not willing to sacrifice my happiness for somebody else, partner or otherwise.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel like I could have been coerced into that because of how deeply I love people. So I'm so glad that I so deeply loved myself enough to do it before I met somebody that I could be swayed by. Not that Ethan would ever try to sway me, but feelings change as you get older.
Well, and
Um,
if he wanted kids really badly, he might not have tried to sway you, but your love for him would have.
exactly. And Ethan truly didn't really have much of an idea of what kind of future he wanted for himself when we met. And he told me that I kind of unlocked a life for him. So, like the same type of light bulb moment that I had on my own. I honestly don't remember what spurred it, but he had through me. And so he was kind of realizing, like, oh my gosh, yeah, this life looks really amazing. And I think that the open-mindedness we both have to knowing that that might change as we get older, but knowing that we will make that decision together is really nice, because I feel like we're on
Mm.
even playing ground, and then meeting in the middle and moving forward.
Oh, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
That's
It
that
was a
intimacy and connection you were talking about.
yeah, I mean, it was just an amazing thing to realize too. And one of the reasons how I knew he was like the one for me, because of that. I mean, it's not a very common position, I would say.
Mhm.
I feel like most people are just like, I don't know yet, but I was so staunchly like, no.
Yeah. I knew in third grade.
Mm. Wow, that's a long time.
I even remember who I was talking to. His name was Cameron. And in third grade,
Cameron.
shout out to Cameron. I don't know what he's doing now. I think I follow him on Instagram. But we were walking up the stairs to the classroom in third grade. And I remember him, we were just randomly, he's like, "Do you think you want kids?" Because and I don't know why. Maybe like he had someone that was pregnant right now at that time and was like, it was on his mind or whatever. You know, kids ask random questions. And I just remember being like, no, I don't think I
No.
do. I don't think this is something I'd want. And if I ever did, I'd want to adopt. And most of my life, because I didn't know what it meant to raise a kid, I did not want my body going through it.
Yeah.
I had zero interest in growing a child, in birthing a child, in any of that. Like, just, I never want my body to have to go through that trauma. And
Mhm.
I am also very squeamish with hospital
Yeah.
stuff and things. And so, like, the thought of doing that, just, I have never been interested. And then I went through college and I took a human sexuality class, and I'm a sex educator, and I'm learning the like explicit details of what it means and what could go wrong, and the sterilization procedures, and just my brain just kept going, childbirth will never happen for me ever.
Yeah.
Like, the more I learned, the more strong I had about that opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've never ever wanted to have my own child my entire life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my best friend being a doula as well was a lot of information for me of realizing
Mhm.
like, oh my God, this is really gnarly. And also just like so much to go through. And if you don't feel so strongly about it, why would you go through all of that?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
So looking back on it now, and the life experiences you've had and this connection that you've found and this timeline that you've unlocked, is there anything you wish you could tell your past self as you were making that choice or going through it? Anything you wish you knew?
I think I would just be like, you're right. I think I would
Mm.
just be like, you're making the right decision. Like I think I knew it the whole time. It felt so correct. And I had hope that I was gonna meet somebody that would get it, you know. I just thought like there's about uh many people in this city, and I'm sure one of them will think I'm
Mhm.
hot and doesn't want to have kids.
Yeah.
So then I just happened to find one not too long after that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing though is that it was like 100% a personal decision, which was so important to me, and felt like I was doing myself a solid. I was giving myself the ultimate gift, and to know that it went swimmingly and nothing went wrong and everything is great, and like also being off birth control has been so amazing for my body, and I got to know like a whole new version of me, which was crazy.
Okay, say more about that.
Yeah, so that is a crazy topic. I learned so much about birth control and birth control withdrawal once I stopped taking it, because the what doctors tell us is that we can just stop at any time, that you don't have to wean yourself off of it. But I had been on birth control since I was 14 because I had a crazy cycle as a kid. Oh my God, it was horrific.
We
Like,
share that story.
oh my God, so bad. And it was birth control was a lifesaver. I just remember going on it and being like, oh my God, I can do things during my period now.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was on that for years and years and years. And for a long time, I didn't have a period at all because of the way that birth control worked with my body and balanced out my cycle. And now I understand that birth control is responsible for the severity of the depression and anxiety that I went through in my college years that I talked about last time that we were on. Now
Mhm.
I understand what was happening there. Because since I have come off birth control, I've also come off of my depression and anxiety medication. And turns out
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Wow.
So, but what happened was that when I came off my birth control after the sterilization surgery, I was okay for like a month and a half. And then shit hit the fan. It was, I was ill every single day for 3 months.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
wake up in the morning, and if I don't eat yogurt, specifically yogurt, within 5 minutes of waking up, I'm throwing up. It was every single morning. And it was, I dropped 20 pounds and I was ill, like just so bad. And I remember I went to a beach house with my mom, and I was just like, "Mom, heal me." And she fed me chicken and rice and gave me a diet of what I was supposed to be eating, because I was trying to eat healthy and then realized I wasn't giving myself the right type of like nutrients that I needed. So got my mommy to put me back on track. But
Yay,
then
shout out to moms.
shout out to mom. Thanks, Rose. Um, but after that, it started to get better, as my body started to cycle out the birth control. But I didn't know what was happening to me because nobody talked about it. And I went to the doctor and no one told me that this is probably what that was. And so I found it, of all things, I was listening to like a random podcast that came across my Spotify, and it was a doctor who was talking about birth control withdrawal. And I was like, oh, that sounds a lot like what I went through. And I listened to the podcast, and it was word for word exactly what I went through: the hair loss, the mood swings, the nausea, the weight loss, everything. And it was just crazy. And in the podcast, she talked about how we don't know like anything about birth control in terms of long-term studies on women's bodies. And I dove headfirst into all of that research, and it is wild how there's almost nothing.
Well, and
And
just everything that's been coming out this year too around what hasn't been studied, how women weren't a part of research studies until the 70s, 80s because cycles were too hard to track. That
yeah.
was it, there's lead in tampons or something, like
Mhm.
we're being poisoned every time we have a menstrual cycle if you use them. Like we're
Yeah.
just that pads weren't actually you know, made for periods. Like it's so wild just in this year what
Mhm.
has come out of like, oh, you don't actually care about women. And you
Yeah.
just look at it and go, it's just so complicated. We're just going to treat you like a different version of a man. And hopefully that's good enough. And like
Yeah.
women have higher likelihood of getting an autoimmune disease and multiple of them. Because if you get one, you're more likely to have several. The mortality rate is still one like the highest in the US for mothers trying to have childbirth. Like it's just we don't care about women.
Yeah.
And when you finally get the answer and someone looks at you and is like, you're not crazy. Let's see if we can help you. Like every time somebody says that to me, because I have so much shit in my body, I just burst into tears. Like, oh my God, you're not just telling me I'm anxious and I need to drink more water.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that like I was on a medication for 14, no, 12 years, and nobody thought that maybe I should be weaned off of it before I stopped. Just absolutely wild. So it was kind of
Mhm.
crazy. There's that meme that's floating around that's like, it was a, oh no, it was a comedian on TikTok that was like, I'd love to go off birth control because I'd love to meet me. You know?
Yeah.
Like I it's crazy how much less anxiety I had when I got off of it, and then it cycled out of my system, and also just like how much baseline, how much more stable my emotions were.
Yeah. I've been on three different birth controls in the last like 5 years. So I was on one for
Oh.
since I was 16,
Mhm.
but I get migraines with auras now, and that's a risk for stroke. And then the pill was a risk for stroke. So I was no longer allowed to be on it. So they just gave me a different one. And that one gave me the worst side effects. I
Mhm.
was getting more migraines. I was getting cold sores. I was getting just like tenderness everywhere. Like I could not exercise half of every month because everything hurt. And every time I went to my doctor, they went, oh, well, we just need some more time to get it to settle out. We'll see what happens. And every time I'd go back and be like, I'm having all these symptoms. I'm not okay with it. Can we change it? And they kept go, no, no, no. It just takes time. It's fine.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, I got a new doctor and they went, oh, let's get you off of that. So now I'm on a new one. And I'm like 3 months in and I'm just like waiting, just, oh God, what is my body going to do?
When's it gonna drop?
But this is my last one, like of all my options because of the stroke risk. So
Mhm.
this is the last one that I can technically try. So if my body doesn't respond well to it, I'm probably going to follow your lead.
Honestly, like the Childfree Reddit page is where I got so much information and where I found my doctor.
Okay.
It
What
was a
kind of
giant.
information did you get on it?
It was, well, it was a lot of validation in living a child-free life, and then also a lot of perks that I like forgot about or didn't realize. And I'm like reading people's lists and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I can do that now. Um,
Mm.
but also they had a giant spreadsheet. I haven't looked obviously in a few years, so I'm not sure if it's still there. But at that point, it was a giant spreadsheet with approved doctors in each state that were like child-free positive doctors. So I found one that was like a 10-minute drive down the street from me. And so I went to her office and she tried to counsel me, gave me some pushback because she's a doctor and she's trying to do her duty of like medical
Yeah, due
information. And
diligence.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then just making sure that I was educated in that, and I was very very confident in that decision. And so she could see that, and she was like, well, I don't personally do that, but I can refer you to a different doctor. And it was so fast. Like I went to that doctor and she she was like, all right, question. Okay, good. Do you want to like come in maybe in 2 weeks? And I was like, okay,
Oh my
let's
gosh.
fucking go, I guess.
That is such a different experience from what I have heard, the
Yeah.
horror stories of people trying to go through it.
Well, that's why I say that I'm so incredibly privileged to that, and the fact that like I got a bill and it was a $12,000 surgery, but then I never saw another bill. Like I got an explanation of benefits bill, and then I called my insurance and they were like, just wait, you'll get another one. And then I never did. So maybe it's just floating around in medical limbo. And one day I'm going to get smacked with a 12K bill. But as of now, it's been 3 years and nothing's happened. So I
Wow.
assume my insurance took care of it because it was specifically labeled as preventative family planning or preventative care or something like that, that was fully covered, which is sick.
Yay. Oh, good. Yes. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the perks that you mentioned because, oh, there's so many of them.
Yeah. So I have a running note in my notes folder that is literally titled like perks of a child-free life. And I just every time I think of one, I write it down.
Okay, what is on this list of yours? I need to know, and our listeners need to know. And I also, quick disclaimer, this is a personal choice. We are
Of
not
course.
trying to convince anyone to be child free. We are just talking about our lifestyle choice and what we are excited about.
And I'm also not trying to like rub it in anybody's face that is a parent to be like, look at all the things I
Yeah.
can do that you can't, because I'm sure that a lot of people can do these things. But I'm just saying, I personally would have a very hard time doing these things if I had children.
Mm-hmm.
I assume. I don't know anything about being a parent because I'm not going to be one.
Well, and there's perks to
Um,
being a parent too, if that is something that you want.
of
So,
course, of course.
yeah.
So for me, a lot of them all kind of revolve around control and the ability to do what I want when I want. And
Okay.
it's one of those things kind of like if I'm getting overwhelmed by the world, like I can unplug and disappear for a couple of days and it won't affect anyone. You know, if I want to say, Ethan, this weekend I really need to get away, we can have a friend come over and watch our cats, or we can set up the auto feeders and we can go. So we don't have to set up a babysitter, and we don't have to I don't have to spend my weekends at like pee wee soccer games. I'm sure I will at one point because I'm going to be like a dutiful auntie, but it's not like I don't have to in order to make that child grow up in a, well rounded environment, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm an artist, and then I also love to do a lot of like hobby things with my hands. So there's a lot of like really dangerous materials that I can leave around, like I can leave out like my leather knives or like my soldering iron not plugged in, obviously, or my Dremel or my shears or anything like out on the work table on a ground floor hobby space. Like it doesn't have to be locked up in a cabinet so that no toddler comes along and snips their fingers off.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then like stuff kind of later on in life that I haven't really achieved yet, but like eventually I'll be able to become debt free and pay off my loans, um and financially help my friends or family. Like I'm so excited to be able to take that energy that I would have been devoting to just trying to like keep myself running and a child running, um instead to devote it to helping out my friends who have children. Like I can't wait to help. I'm excited for that, and I'm
But
excited to
you
like
can opt in and also
exactly.
opt out when you're done versus you are stuck in it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be so useful to Reina when she ends up having a child one day, because I can be like, all right, we have a standing date where I come over every Tuesday and Thursday and I clean your home for you, because that's something I enjoy doing. And I know it would take a huge load off of her back, so we've already kind of like been talking about ways that I can support and like contribute to the family without actually having to mother myself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like later on in life, it's my bestie's kid. I'm going to love it, no matter who they end up being, unless they're an asshole, but that won't happen.
Not with
uh,
you in the picture as a perfect auntie.
of course not. They're gonna be sassy though.
Yes, sassy and sarcastic. That is
Yeah.
how I want to portray myself as an aunt. If anyone in my
Yeah.
life ever has children.
Yes. But then also, like, on the serious note, like, I think I'm self-aware enough to realize that like I don't have a whole lot of patience when it comes to children, and I don't see myself being able to do the same kinds of things that Raina can do when I've seen her with kids, or like when I see parents, like, not to say that I would go so far as to be abusive to my child or anything like that, but there are times in which like I'm frustrated at my cat and I throw something like a pillow at the wall or something like that. And even if nothing actually happens to the child, like that sticks with them. And they
Mm-hmm.
they get that, like the energy, not to sound so woo woo about it, because I'm not like a crystals
Well,
aura
no, it's
girl.
your nervous system. They pick up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also, no shade to the crystal aura girlies. I love you guys. I just think that yeah, that like seeps into other people's
Mm-hmm.
energy, and I don't want to contribute to that. And I sometimes have a short fuse when it comes to that. So I just don't want to like even risk it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the past 2.5 weeks, I've been pet sitting this
Mm.
adorable sweet dog, but she was confused and she was in a new situation and she didn't understand the routine. And it took a while to get her accustomed to what it is to live in this house. And dogs, they are not children. I know this, but they're basically like slightly easier toddlers.
Mhm.
Once they have their routine, they're good, but they constantly need help and they need attention. And I mean, Mozzie, we used to have to wipe her butt every time she went out to go to the bathroom because that's just,
Oof.
as she got older, she just couldn't. And we had to put chapstick on her twice a day because her lips would get chapped. And it's like, with two dogs in the house for 2.5 weeks, which I haven't had two dogs in the house for over a year now, but Maz was lazy and easy. So that didn't really count. I never stopped moving. There was
Mhm.
always someone that needed something from me. And if I wasn't sitting in this chair working in a meeting, in a Zoom call, I was hopping between the dogs and feeding them and playing with them, or one of them's barking because they're afraid at something outside. And oh my
Mhm.
gosh, you haven't been out in 3 hours because I've been working. We have to go do that. And at the end of the day, they want to play and they don't want you to just sit and focus on your hobbies. And like, I'm so tired just with
Yeah.
two dogs. I am so tired and I had help. Like,
Yeah.
like I live with multiple people right now and they all helped the best that they could. And I'm so tired. And
Yeah.
when I think about having a kid, it's like I prioritize rest so much in my life because of my
Same.
anxiety, because of my panic attacks, because of my chronic pain. Like, if I cannot rest and recharge my nervous system and my soul, I will just, like, Juliet will bark extra that night and I will just burst into tears.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's the energy. Even if I don't want to be doing it, I know how I am. And if I take on the mental load for too long, like I shut down so hard. And
Yeah.
that wouldn't be fair to any child. And it wouldn't be fair to me that I would be constantly on edge at the end of my rope, just trying to survive until the kid is old enough to be able to have their own hobbies and go to sleepovers, you know?
Yeah, I'm truly afraid of the person that I would become when I'm very at the bottom of my barrel, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and not to say that like everybody becomes like a monster when they're at that point, but I'm like you, where I really prioritize a slower life, or like a slower pace
Mhm.
and relaxation. And I mean, I've had people ask me like, why don't you take up a second job or like a side hustle or something like that? Like do design work on the side. And I'm like, just because I don't want to. I love
Yeah.
a slow life. I love being able to go to work and come home and go on a walk and make dinner and like not have to just constantly be like working, 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 hustling all the time. And I just, yeah, I value those quiet, slow moments a lot. And like nothing about children is quiet and slow.
No, it ramps up. And like, again, lots of pluses for it for sure.
Sure.
But if you prioritize rest, if you prioritize peace, if you don't want the crazy energy as soon as you finish your workday,
Yeah.
like it's not for you.
Mhm.
And it 100% is not for me.
No, no, thank you.
No,
Politely,
thank you.
no thanks.
I'm good. I appreciate you. I'm good with my fluffy puppy.
Yeah,
She is already enough work.
I love being able to come home and smoke a bowl and not worry about putting a child in danger.
Yep. Yep. I love that I take Juliet for a walk, which is also good for me. And then she's like, cool, I'm gonna go take a nap for 2 hours. I will see you
Yeah.
at dinner time. And I'm like, perfect. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I can't say that my child-free life is super easy at the moment because my cat is a senior cat and he has decided now to start peeing everywhere that's not his litter box. So I'm starting to feel a little worn down.
That
But
is normal for pet owners too.
he sleeps for 18 hours out of the day and kids don't do that. So
They do not.
still gonna prefer cats.
Um,
Childless cat lady is me.
yes. And I'm a childless dog lady. And look at us. We're
Look at
living our best
us.
lives together. I cannot wait to grow old with you.
Yes. Holding hands, skipping into the sunset with no children. I love it.
Yes, we're going to be doing like 70-year-old cartwheels because we are the child in our own lives.
Exactly. Wheelchair racing.
Yes. Um, okay, my brain jumped back to the what you were talking about with how after you were having that conversation with Ethan and like he started to unlock what it could mean for his life. I had a similar conversation with Elliot
Mhm.
because, first week of dating somebody, I'm like, this is me. You either
Yeah.
like it or you don't. We're very similar that way. Uh, but he was very similar of, I never really thought about it.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite things that he does, because we walk by a playground sometimes in one of the loops that we take Juliet, and the kids will be playing, and Elliot will just be like, do you know how much those children's clothes cost?
Oh, yeah.
And they grow so fast. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna have to buy them new clothes like next week. Do you
Mhm.
understand how much money would go into just clothing a child as they age? And I'm just in there like, yeah. He's like, we could
Yeah.
go on vacations for that.
Mhm.
we we could just eat out more.
And like honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons why it's just another reason why we should all be raising children in community. I mean, both my friends talk about this often about how they want to live in, the idealized communities of like our friends and family that all help each other. But like that is the thing, is that we're not meant to just have kids with just like
Yeah.
ourselves and being the main caregiver. It's like you need a break to be able to be a human. And it's just not the way that we live right now. And it's like maybe my opinion on motherhood would have been different if
Mm,
that was the life that we lived, but we don't live that life. And so creating our own communities is so important to raising a child. I mean, like that phrase, it
yeah.
takes a village. Like
But it's
I just
true.
it's so true. And I just that's not the way that things are right now. And it's interesting too hearing you talk about Elliot talk like observing the children, because Elliot is such a playful soul and so is Ethan. And I feel like they both um being besties, I don't know if everybody knows that our partners are best friends, and
That's how we
they
know each other.
yes. And they're both like, I've had people say like Ethan would make such a good dad, Elliot would make such a good
Mhm.
dad. And it's always like, yes, they would. And but like that's just because I believe that I wouldn't make a good mother doesn't mean that that's my reason for not having a kid.
Mhm.
It's just because they would make a good dad doesn't mean that they want to be a dad.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to realize that like that they can make that decision as well,
Mhm.
and that just because somebody is good with kids doesn't mean that they should have them.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of everyone's reactions to me. Anytime
Mm.
I meet someone new or I have a colleague and I just, they're like, oh, you're going to be such a good mom when you have kids later. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going to have kids. And they're like, but, but you would be such a good mom. Like, I don't care.
Yeah. And
That's not the reason to have children just because I'd be good at it. Like
Mhm.
my parents wanted me to be an engineer because I'd be good at it. I didn't want to be, and I'm not an engineer, and I am much happier because of it. Like I'm
Oh,
not going to bring a child into this world of mine just because it's something I could potentially be good at in the future. If I
yeah.
don't want it or if I wouldn't like it, then I wouldn't be good at it. Even if
Mhm.
technically on paper I was doing everything right. I want to be a fun aunt. I want
Yeah.
to take the kid for the weekend, take it camping, teach the kid how to rock climb. If you're having a really stressful day, I love the idea of like, let me come over and cook and clean for you. I'm really good at that. Like, I will happily be a part of your village. Just don't make me have the kid in my house.
Yeah. I want my house to stay clean.
Yeah,
And
that's
then we
all
can
I
help you
ask.
clean yours.
Let me go home and have my peace, and then I'll come over and give you pockets of my peace.
Yes.
I'll share it.
I'll be your lifeline.
Yeah. I'll remind you of what it means to have your own identity and
Yeah.
help you keep yourself while you help raise a child.
And it's so important. It's so important.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if anyone in my life that I'm close with will end up having kids. I remember I was sitting with a group of women one time and they were kind of talking about it, but really just beating around the bush of how what their opinions were. And I finally went, I don't want kids. And I could feel the release of tension in the room when I said it. And everyone was just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want kids either.
I actually hate my kids.
Well, none of them have
No,
kids.
I'm just
And
kidding.
yeah, right. But they're like, I didn't know I was allowed to say that. It's like, yeah, we need to end this stigma. It is okay to not have kids.
Yeah.
And yeah,
It feels like the majority of people that have a problem with it are typically conservative or religious, which is like, for obvious reasons they feel that way. And like obvious reasons, as in like they've stated them quite loudly. So we don't really need to
hmm
go over them.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but most people that I meet when I talk about it or when I mention it, they're always like, "Oh, cool," and then that's it.
yep.
Nobody
Oh
really
yeah,
cares.
yeah. Nobody really cares. And the people in my life that do want kids or have had kids, like I have a friend from high school, and I remember us sitting around talking about how much she wanted to be a mom, and she
Mhm.
became a mom this year. And I sent her a message like, "Oh my gosh, this has always been your dream. I'm so excited for you." And it's like, it doesn't have to affect others that this is my choice. And
Mhm.
it doesn't have to affect me what your choice is. I'm going to support you, whatever you decide, whether you have a sticky little munchkin running around or a cute, fluffy animal that I would much rather spend more time with. Like, either way, I'm going to love your children. Just don't put it on me.
Yeah. Also, just like I can't wait to be a dink and to have like
Yes, a dinkwad
a
or a dink.
sauna
What
in
is
my
a
house. Dink is double income, no kids.
yes, but dinkwag is double income, no kids with a dog. And my brain was
Oh,
dinkwalk doesn't sound as good like with a cat.
yeah. Dink walk.
Dinkwalk.
But
Dinkwop with a pet. Ah.
yeah, I think that's just a fun perk, honestly, of being able to be like talking with Ethan about things and be like, maybe we'll go to Aruba, maybe we'll go here, maybe we'll go there, maybe we'll build a sauna in our house when we get older because we'll have enough money to
Mhm.
hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yep.
But
We want to turn
yeah,
our house into an adult playground.
you guys are going to turn it into the next Meow Wolf. You go to it and
I I have given Elliot permission for one room. He can do whatever he wants and turn it into full neon, but he only gets one room.
I think that's a correct boundary to set with him.
Yeah. Because he is just so much about all of the color everywhere. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the everything that I want to live in and look at all the time. Because I get
Welcome.
overstimulated sensory wise. And so I need calm spaces that are not full of a lot of color everywhere.
Yeah. You're like, welcome to our home, the Crayola factory.
Yes. Uh, okay. Anything else about how you've grown or this lifestyle that you have fully embraced, or anything that you wish other people would know?
Um, well, I mean, it's kind of like there are things that I wish people would know, but like everything that I had just said, I wish people would understand when they meet people that are child free or when they hear about it and realize like the main thing is just being like, I'm not like a monster because I don't want to have kids. And also, I'm not judging you for having kids ever. And I don't hate your children on sight because of it. Like, do I love seeing a child on an airplane? No. But like, if your kid is well behaved, like, I admire it. When I see parents that have well behaved children or well mannered kids, I'm like, good on you, mom and dad. Like, you guys are killing it. And I like those kids typically.
Mhm.
But I also think that one thing that comes from the years since having a sterilization procedure, which really like solidified it for me too, to really just completely, like I said before, blow up the bridge of being like, well, there's no turning back. This is my life now. And that has instilled in me a sense of security because nobody can take it away from me. It's like, it's done. It's already done. What are you going to do? So that when
Yeah.
people say things like, when they don't know that Ethan and I say that I'm fixed, which is such a funny verbiage. I
Been
almost
spayed.
always, I truly like slip it into conversation. I'm like, when I got fixed. So I almost just said it here.
Yes. Oh, this
But
needs to be a thing. I might start saying that.
people who don't know that I got fixed will say things to me and like, oh, well, you'll understand when you have kids, or like, you'll change your mind later. And it's, a common rhetoric. So I'm not blaming them
Mhm.
at all for saying that. But I think in the beginning, I might have jumped on them and been like, well, I'm not having kids. And now I kind of just go like, yeah, maybe. It's kind of like they don't need to know. And there's a
Yeah.
certain security in being like, I don't need to fight it because like it's none of your business.
It's your
And if I
power and it's your choice.
yeah, and if I want to share it with you, I will proudly. But also, if I'm just like not really feeling it that day, then I could be like, yeah, believe what you want. But I mean, proof is going to be in the pudding when I don't have kids.
Yeah. So something you just said, I want to give you this fact um, from this article that I was reading ahead of this podcast. So it's from the Global Library of Women's Medicine. And the article came from 2008, which was one of the most recent ones that I could find. Most of them were from the 80s, which is really
Oof.
weird. But it was sterilization long term issues. And they explicitly looked at regret.
Hmm.
And I found two different ones. One was from the 80s, but this one is a little bit more recent. But what I really love was they did a meta analysis of all the research they could find, and regret was only 0.9% to 26%, depending on the article. So most women that go under it or choose this
Mhm.
sterilization do not regret it. And the article where it cited 26% of women, only 10% were interested in reversing it. So even though they're like, I might have made a different choice, they wouldn't actually change it.
Mhm.
And the most common reasons for regret was either it was right after an abortion and the doctor pressed the issue.
Oh.
They had a change in partner and the new spouse wanted kids, and they already had kids and they wanted another child with the new spouse, or
Mhm.
they lost a child and
Mhm.
suddenly there was this kind of need to fill. So most people that chose child free life and made this choice did not regret it. Most of it was like, I want another kid, or my life
Yeah.
circumstances have changed completely. But also, what's wild is that women under 30 had a higher likelihood of regret, and that was at like 20%.
Mhm.
Whereas anyone over 30 that still wants to be free, there was a less likelihood of regret, and that was at like 6%.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I was originally going to like wait for a while. I was going to wait for a couple of years, or I had the 30 goal as well when I discovered that the surgery was an option before I had like sought out a doctor. And then I kind of just like, as the months wore on, I was like, no, this feels like the right decision. I'm just going to do it now. And I'm really glad that I did that. But I also think that like if I had not felt that strongly, I probably would have waited until 30 as well. Cause
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good marker of being like, well, if I haven't had kids now, this is where people start talking about the biological clock ticking down and the
Yeah.
chances of getting pregnant going down. So um but yeah, I think that it just depends on the severity of your feeling. Like that's why I don't like it when people give any like sort of advice on like what age to wait until, you know, or to be like,
Mhm.
oh, you have to go through all of this before you can decide. It's like it just depends on how severely you feel.
Yeah. Someone close to me got a vasectomy when I was in like middle school. And I heard about it because they were an adult at the time. And my reaction was, wow, that's a good idea. And I was in middle school. So again, this has never changed, but I'm
Yeah.
also terrified of hospitals and procedures. And so I think 30 was my like, maybe I'll be ready by then, even though I've
Yeah.
always wanted it. Like I'm terrified.
I mean, it as like a comfort, the procedure part was the easy part. The recovery is hard, but not as hard as like a major, I mean, it's a major surgery, but yeah, it's not like if you had like your hip operated on or something like that. Like in terms of the healing process, it's just painful. But I think that like as women or like just as people who menstruate in general, it was nothing that I haven't felt before. It just felt like intense cramps for like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So it's nothing you haven't been through, you know? It's the
Yep.
same kind of thing where it's like, yeah, it hurts, but like it's not the end of the world and I would do it again.
Yeah.
Given the chance, it's a lot less painful than childbirth.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I will never go through.
Yeah. One thing that was really funny as like a last little tidbit too is that I have a tattoo on my hip and my doctor was making jokes because it was like in an unfortunate position because she had to cut it and she beheaded my bird. So there's like a little bird that's like flying, like birds that are flying in a line over my hip. And yeah, one of them has like a silver line right through its neck. And she,
Oh my
afterwards,
gosh.
she was like, I'm so sorry. I had to behead your bird. As she was like taking out my stitches a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, how dare you?
But also, it's so symbolic of the procedure that you had done, of just like, nope, this isn't
I
happening.
think I told her I think I was like, no worries, he's just wearing a necklace.
I love your perspective on the world. And I love just, again, how solid you are in who you are.
Thank you. I'm very proud of myself, honestly. I wouldn't have yeah, I wouldn't have ever really thought that I would have so much conviction about it, but it was like the more I sat in it, the more it felt right. And then I realized after the procedure that it was like I don't have to defend myself anymore.
Mm.
Not to say that the procedure is the only way to feel that way. It was, again, everything is subjective and everything is whatever makes you happy. I mean, it's the root of all of this is the ability as women, or I don't want to keep saying that because there are plenty of people who can fall pregnant who are not identifying as women, as people who menstruate and people who can have children biologically. I think that it's important for us to be able to realize that like it's so individual to each person and nobody
Mhm.
knows what anybody else is going through or feeling or all of the history that goes behind it. But the long and the short of it being like, if you don't want it, you don't have to do it. And I think that I don't want kids is enough of an example. Like a lot of the times I just leave it to that. I give
Mhm.
an older lady is trying to shame me into like, why don't you want it? I'm just like, I don't want kids.
Yeah,
You don't need to know any reason why.
I just don't. And whatever you choose is right.
Yeah. And that's enough. You don't have to give anybody else anything other than that.
Yeah. Listen to yourself and don't make choices based on what the world says you should do or what your life should look like.
Mhm. And also, I'll throw as a little aside, the excuse, who's going to take care of you when you're older, does not always apply. Okay. I know plenty of older
Yeah.
people that have been abandoned by their children, whose children don't end up taking care of them when they're older. You can
And
build a
don't even
community.
visit.
Yeah. You can build a community and have that without actually birthing anyone.
And I saw an older woman who chose child-free life, who was basically like, I have been told my whole life that I would regret this. I am in my 80s now, and I'm going to tell you, I have zero regrets. Like, I made this choice. I am happy about this choice. And what
Mhm.
matters is that community. She's like,
Mhm.
find friends that are older than you, have friends that are younger than you, and then you take turns taking care of each other as you need help.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what it
Mhm.
looks like. It takes a village.
Yeah. It's so special. It's
I
so
know.
important.
Okay. Any last thoughts? I feel like we've talked about so many different topics today, but this,
Yeah,
I mean, we stayed on, but everything around this. Um, Anything else?
Just do whatever the hell you want to do. And don't let anybody make you feel bad about it.
That is the soundbite for this episode. If you take nothing else away from this, take away that one soundbite.
I mean, it's true. It's just at the end of the day, it's your life. Do what you want with it. Whatever's going to make you happy is the right choice.
Ray is one of my favorite people to have deep conversations with. She is always ready to meet me wherever I'm at and vice versa. I appreciate her willingness to share her experience, give her perspective from a place of acceptance and openness. And honestly, I just love that she was willing to share her words with all of you. I hope that something we shared today resonated with you. And even if it didn't, I hope you were able to see what openness can look like around stigmatizing topics. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, visit my website and donate on Podbean's Patreon program, or find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.